You know, if these past 12 months have taught us anything about life, it's how precious that it can be and how quickly things can change. One minute you're standing there in a nightclub and your eyes meet across a bottle of Castaway, or as more likely these days it's swipe left or right on your mobile, and then before you know it, you're off on a completely different trajectory to where you thought you were going. It's meeting the parents, it's drinks and dinner with friends, it's buying your first place together, and arguing about whether or not that vintage 1956 Monaco Grand Prix poster really does go above the fireplace. The answer to which, by the way, is always yes. And then before you know it, you're choosing out place settings and invitations and, you know, whether or not the Death Metal Brigade is a really suitable band for that important first dance. And then there's your car. You see, because inevitably the little patter of tiny feet is going to happen, and those big fancy foreign holidays to the Seychelles, well, they're no longer going to happen, and it's going to be trips down to Cornwall in an Airbnb and out to IKEA to pick out bedroom furniture and push chairs from Mothercare and the like. So the sports car, well, that's going to have to go. But if you do believe, like Whitney Houston does, that the children really are our future, you're going to want to be responsible parents and go electric. But what to buy? Well, here at AutoEV, we're going to help you decide on our very first twin test of family crossovers. I maybe wouldn't use this for picking out wallpaper or stuff though, yeah? Before we get on to this week's twin test of the new Vauxhall Mokka E and revised Hyundai Kona Electric, it is of course that time where I tell you to like the videos, subscribe to the channel and press the little bell button down below so you'll receive notification of when our next video goes live. We'll be very grateful if you do so, but unfortunately that doesn't guarantee that there won't be a second Scottish referendum. Back to the cars. Familiar names, but maybe unfamiliar faces. You see, the Kona has just gone through its midlife facelift and it is a good car. But now, of course, it's got the new Mokka to contend with. And this is the first Mokka to be electrified, and it's also a brand new car from the ground up because, of course, Vauxhall is part of PSA Group. So it's based on familiar componentry that we've tested before. But does it have what it takes to take the fight to the wonderful little Kona and get your choice as family crossover? Let's find out. So let's start with the Kona, and this is its sort of midlife facelift, if you like. And I've always really quite liked the Kona, especially when it's in petrol, guys, because it gets this sort of pseudo SUV cladding on it. But for some reason, they change it when it goes electric, and it loses all of that, and everything goes a bit body colour, and they smooth over the nose. It looks a bit, I don't know, it loses a little bit of character, I think. It's a bit like putting Dennis the Menace in a pair of chinos. I mean, it's still Dennis the Menace, but you know what I'm saying. And this smoothed over front nose, does that remind you of anything? And down the side of the car remains as is. I mean, it's still a nice looking car. I mean, it's okay, it's not ugly, but it just doesn't really excite any. The problem as well as losing the sort of cladding, you don't get the N-line sporty trim in the electric that you do in the petrol. It's almost like Hyundai saying, well, because you've chosen to go electric, you can't be sporty. Why? And at the rear, it's the same again. They haven't really changed, but there's some new LED lights. But that's it. It's a bit somber looking, especially in this darker grey colour. Especially when it's parked next to that. A car that I think has to be the best looking Vauxhall since the original Tigra of the early 1990s. I mean, look at it. It just looks phenomenal. This is this new visor graphic that Vauxhall have got going on around the front. And it's chunky, big sort of like wheel arches and big alloy wheels, and this contrast red here and black. You can also have it with a black bonnet, which apes the sort of like the 1970s Opel Manta, which is quite cool too. But the whole thing just has this funky, stylish vibe going on that you just wouldn't believe comes from a Vauxhall. But it's round the rear, this sort of rear three-quarter angle where you see it, that I think is one of the Mokka's best, because it really notices that wheel at each corner stance. The whole car feels really hunkered down, looks really squat and purposeful on the road. And of course, especially with this two-tone paint finish, and there are some real vibrant colours available in the car as well. Makes it much more distinctive than the rather sombre looking Kona. This lovely light graphic across the back here, blacked out Griffin, and then the black sort of like script to the Mokka across the rear. Yeah, I think this is a much more distinctive looking car than the Kona. Round one to Vauxhall then. Now styling's all very well and good, but we're talking about small family cars here, so practicality is what's key. Now the easiest thing for me to do would have been to get my daughter and her friends involved in this test, but I have no desire to try and film with a bunch of 7-year-old terrorists. So meet our substitute, Barry the bear. He's a bit shy. Doesn't say much. But you can sort of see the family resemblance. And there's no point in bringing suitcases today because you have a family, you can't afford to go on holiday anymore. So, 332 litres of boot space in the Kona, with the Mokka is 310. Not a massive difference, but it does mean that you can get a pushchair like that in, Barry's bag, and those extra litres make a difference between being able to get a scooter in and having a massive meltdown from a child because you couldn't. Both cars have the 60-40 split rear seat, which is easy enough to sort of like gain access to from inside the car, but neither of them actually fold flat, which isn't ideal for those IKEA trips. The other thing is the Kona has a slightly higher load bay area, so it's a nice flat floor in, whereas the Mokka has a little bit of a dip, although it also does have a variable height boot floor, so you can raise it slightly. So what about the rear seats? Well, it's quite a narrow sort of aperture to try and load Barry in there as well, but he's got reasonable amount of room when he's in there. The only downside is there's no folding armrest for his water bottle, and they don't really fit in the door bins either. So with no storage, those horrible little waxy baby bell packaging things that end up everywhere, they're going to end up being passed through down to the front once they're obviously finished with them. But what about for adults? Well, yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's smaller than the Peugeot E2008 that shares the underpinnings of this car, and obviously things like the Citroen EC4. It's not cramped back here for someone my size, 5'7", 5'8". I've got knee room. I've got headroom despite the sort of like the sloping sort of like rear roof line, but you'd certainly not have 3 adults across the back here. You certainly get 3 children across. One downside is the ISOFIX points are hidden behind these little zips in the seat, so they're more difficult to find in the Mokka than they are in the Kona. But Vauxhall countered as well by having ISOFIX mounted to the front passenger seat, so you've got 3 ISOFIX fittings in the car. So good and bad, but the lack of storage back here really lets the car down in my opinion, especially with children. And of course, because you can have the Mokka with an internal combustion engine, you've got the raised floor hump here, although you do have the 2 USB charge ports back here if they have iPads or things. But yeah, mixed bag. Whereas the Kona, it's actually much better. There's a much wider door aperture for me to get Barry in there. Come on fella, you sit there. And centre armrest for his drinks bottle, and storage nets and good sized door bins that you can get bottles into too. But of course the other downside with here is there's no USB ports in the back of the Kona. But how is it for adults? Yeah, it's actually a little bit better. Although the floor feels like it's pushing my legs up a little bit, there does feel a little bit more room here. There's certainly more headroom. And the other benefit with the Kona is you get this grey headlining, and of course because of the styling of the Mokka that sweeps up, there just seems a lot more light in here, so it is a little bit airier inside the Kona. And as I say, there's more storage, there's net here, the centre armrest. So I would say the Kona wins this round. I think he's gone to sleep. Shh. He's like a bear with a sore head when he wakes up. Well, lovely design inside the Mokka. It's much more integrated than the Kona is, whereas the Kona has this sort of stuck-on screen here. This feels like it's all one. In fact, it looks a little bit like Mercedes, almost, but it's actually two screens. This is just a centre bit of plastic here. But it's nice, and everything's in your nice line of sight. The digital instrumentation doesn't look like a lot to start with, but actually the clarity of it is really, really good. So it's easy to see at a glance. Oh, the other thing that I really like as well is you get the physical heating and ventilation controls that you do in the Kona as well, so everything's nice and easy to hand. You get a good driving position. As I say, the steering wheel is nice and sort of located well in front of you. In this particular car, it's heated as well because it's the SRI model. Well, where it lacks a little bit is in actual storage. You've got this sort of like open area down here, this console where you've got the drive selection and your drive mode button here, your electric parking brake, but you've only got this little tray in here, and whilst it does fit your mobile, it's not wireless charging, and the cup holders here don't fit that big bottle, and there's nothing in there. That has to go down in the side pocket there. But as I say, the design of it I really like, and this metallic red flash round, it looks great because that mirrors what's on the outside, and this it looks sort of carbon fibre like, but it's just a nice kind of checker plate kind of plastic. Everything feels really solid too. There are some harder plastics, but not in anything particularly downgrading or low rent. It's just, yeah, it's nice. I'm not so keen on this piano black console, as I say. That's the only thing. It looks a little bit cheap, and it's, you know, the few days I've had the car, it's covered in dust already and a few fingerprints, obviously, but it's okay. Now, equipment-wise, again, they're pretty much a match for match. As I say, this one's got the heated steering wheel. You've got a lot of the main controls up here as well for your infotainment system here, for volume, cruise control over here. You also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. The touchscreen sort of like navigation is relatively easy to use. You get DAB radio, you get Bluetooth obviously. It's got all its integrated apps and things. So yeah, it's okay. It's pretty good. Now the Kona, although it's a facelifted car, still has this rising console that the last car had, which I really, really like. Everything's just nice and easy to hand stretch away. Plus as well, our water bottle fits in the cup holders, but more than that, you've got this lovely little storage tray in here for your mobile with a USB port, so it's all nice away. There's this massive big tray underneath this, you can put more stuff in. A much bigger centre cubby box in there. I mean, it's a family car, you've got to put your Haribo somewhere, let's be honest. And the way the cockpit's laid out, it's similar because you've got your infotainment system in your line of sight like you do in the Mokka, but it's a separate screen. It's not as well integrated. I prefer the design of the Mokka's dash up here. You've also, like the Mokka, got a digital instrument panel in front of you as well. And that will change depending obviously on the drive mode you're in. So when you're in sport, it all glows red. When you go into eco, it all goes a bit blue. And in the normal mode, it's this kind of white silver thing. It's nice, it's okay. I prefer the sort of like the more basic clarity of the Mokka, if I'm being honest with you. Driving position again is good. Both seats in both cars give a good driving position. There's enough under thigh support, and there's enough sort of like lateral support for any sort of like more enthusiastic driving parents out there. The head restraints in the Kona are slightly further forward as well, which is nicer. They feel really far back in the Mokka. The only downside with the Kona interior is the plastics, and I've criticised Hyundai for this before, and I still do it. Everything's this sort of silver plastic, and I really don't like that. I don't know if you remember a car, the Chrysler Crossfire, which was based on a Mercedes SLK, and to save money, what Chrysler did was they lifted the dashboard straight out of the SLK, but to make it look different, they went down to Harvard's and bought a rattle can of silver paint and sprayed it all. It just looks like that in here. It just doesn't, it doesn't have that sort of air of quality about it that I feel it should have. And also as well, with this being the SE Connect model, the lead-in model, you can see the blanking plates here, which is obviously going to show your friends that you couldn't afford the heated seats because obviously you're having to send your kids to ballet school and rugby lessons now. But on saying all of that, all of that aside, the more practical side of the interior gives victory in this class to the Kona. Now the Hyundai Kona comes in two battery sizes depending on your trim level. We've got the SE Connect, which is only available in the lower battery pack size of 39 kilowatt hours. The Mokka is just the one battery size you can have across the range, which is a 50 kilowatt hours. So respective ranges are WLTP figures of 189 miles for the Kona and 201 for the Mokka. But given how efficient we've always found the Hyundais and the Kias, and how, well, mixed results we've had from the PSA group cars, I'm probably thinking that on a par it's somewhere between 150 to 180 miles, depending obviously on outside conditions. Now charging speeds, both will take charging speeds of up to 100 kilowatts. To go from a 10 to 80% charge in the Kona from a 100 kilowatt charger, you're looking at around about 45 minutes. If it's a 50 kilowatt charger, believe it or not, it's only an extra minute at 46 minutes. The Mokka is a bit quicker. It will take a 100 kilowatt charger speed from 10 to 80% in 30 minutes. But if it's a 50 kilowatt, then it's on par with the Kona at around about 45 minutes. Now, at home from your 7 kilowatt wall box, you're going to be charging the Mokka up at around about 7.5 hours and the Kona just over 6. So both cars are very evenly matched when it comes to power. In fact, they're identical. As I say, 136 PS, 134 brake horsepower. But the Kona, its 0 to 60 time is a second slower than the Mokka. It's just a shade under 10 seconds. But it's not how the car feels. It's weird, there's a sort of urgency to it when you put your foot on the throttle, and it's not a controlled urgency. It's odd. It's like it's fighting the front wheels. Now I've had this before when I drove the more powerful Kona version last year. What I found was it was very easy for it to sort of like chirrup its front tyres when you just gave it a little bit more of a prodigious right foot. And certainly mid-bend or pulling out of a junction in the wet, well, you certainly do feel that. As I say, it's quite easy to spin up its wheels. And as I say, it just feels a little bit not tied down, is how I would put it. Now that's in, you've got the 3 driving modes, and that's in sort of like normal mode. When you put your foot down, it does feel like it gathers momentum quite quickly, and to all intents and purposes it does. But of course you can go through eco, normal and sport, and in sport it has a little bit of a sharper throttle response. Don't notice a big difference in the steering. The steering is quite light, not over assisted, not fingertip light, but lighter than the Mokkas. Now some people will like that. I prefer the slightly heavier, less assisted kind of steering that the Mokka gives you, especially in the sport mode. Otherwise it's quite nice. The brakes are better than they are in the Mokka as well. There's more feel from the pedal, which is good, and the regeneration on the Kona is much better. In the Mokka, you either have it on or you have it off, whereas in the Kona, like most of the Hyundais and Kias that we've driven, you've got these 2 paddles behind the steering wheel where you can adjust the level of regeneration that you get from none to quite aggressive. It's not quite one pedal driving, but it's not far off, in fairness. The area where the Kona does disappoint, however, is in its refinement, and this is a real disappointment for me. And I've always found this when I've driven them, and I thought it might have been different. I mean, it's not uncomfortably loud. It's not as refined as I thought it was going to be. There is quite a lot of road noise comes through from the Kona's tyres, and I do wonder whether or not it's the tyres that cause the problem. I wonder whether that's it. It's road roar you can hear, and it's almost like there's a little resonance round about the wheel arch that seems to eke into the cabin. The ride quality itself is okay. I'd say both cars are on a par with each other. The Mokka feels quite firm. This feels a little bit more floaty, but both are probably equally as comfortable in terms of the ride quality. But yeah, I think as a driver's car, the Mokka's probably a little bit better. Yeah, no, it definitely is. It definitely is better. It's better as a sort of like it's a sportier drive. There's a bit more involvement from it. You feel a bit more detached with the Kona, and I would applaud that if it wasn't for that slight lack of refinement. I think that's where it falls down in the most part for me. I just was expecting it to be, I thought it might be better than it is in terms of its refinement, but it's not. Oh well. Now the Mokka produces the same 136 PS that the Kona does, so 134 brake horsepower in old money, and it's the same across all the PSA group cars because it uses the same motor that they all do. But as I've said before, when I was driving the Citroen EC4, don't think of them as being the same car with just different bodywork on them. They're not. They've got their own character, and I have to say I really like the Mokka's character. It feels quite sporty to drive. You sit in it rather than on it like you do in the Mokka, so you feel a bit more connected to the car. Again, you've got a good driving position that you do in the Kona, but it just feels, I don't know, it feels a bit sportier to be in here and to drive. And I'm not talking about ultimate performance, although it is quicker. It's a second quicker to 60 at 8.8 seconds than the Kona is. But it's also the way the chassis interacts with you as well. Now you've got the 3 driving modes, as you pretty much always do in all electric cars: eco, normal and sport. And when you put it into sport, the steering weights up really nicely. It's got a really small amount of assistance, which makes the steering geometry just feel really good. You can really feel the turning on the car. It grips well. Turning's good, it's nicely balanced through the corners, and I have to say, I think in terms of throwing a small crossover down a country road, the Mokka's got to be one of the best. It really feels sporty to drive. Now it feels quite quick when you're in the sport mode anyway, but it doesn't feel as frantic as the Kona does. The Kona feels a bit more out of control. The Mokka seems to just gel a bit better, and also its refinement is better as well. There's not as much noise comes in from the outside than you in the Kona, and that's one big area the Kona really does disappoint, is in its refinement. But I have to say, not with the Mokka. It's a lovely, pleasant little cabin to be in. But of course there has to be a downside, and that downside is, yes, you've guessed it, the brakes. It's these PSA group brakes. There's just, I don't know, they just can't seem to get this right. There's a deadness to the pedal. It feels like you're pushing against a wet sponge for the first half-inch of travel on the brake pedal, and you genuinely feel, is it gonna happen? Is it gonna start to brake? And then it does, and it's just not a particularly nice brake pedal to use. And again, like the other PSA group cars, it only has one level of regeneration, whereas the Kona has the 3. You can adjust the Kona much more, and therefore you're much closer to that one pedal driving style that's quite nice through town in the Hyundai than you are in the Vauxhall. But on the whole, in terms of a car that you'd want to grab the keys and go out and have a drive in, it's Victory Vauxhall. Not a Vauxhall Victory. Well, I suppose it is a Vauxhall Victory. Oh no, it was the Victor. Yeah, the Vauxhall Victor. Yeah. Showing my age now. Now, both of these cars fall under the £35,000 bracket, meaning they are applicable for the UK government's plug-in car grant, which is available at time of filming. The model that we have here in the Mokka is the SRI Nav Premium, which is effectively its top of the range model at a whisker just under £33,000, but the range does start at under £30,000 for its SE model. The Kona that we have here, the SE Connect, is considerably cheaper at just £27,000 after the grant's taken into account, but its range does expand up to £37,000 for the 64 kilowatt ultimate spec car. But for the same money as this Mokka here, you could have the middle spec Kona with the uprated 64 kilowatt hour battery, giving you close to 300 miles of range and a similar spec car. So value wise, victory Hyundai. So as well as facing competition from each other, they both face competition from within internal sources. PSA Group give us not just this, but the excellent Peugeot E2008 and the DS3 Crossback E-Tense, as well as the Citroen EC4. From Hyundai, obviously it's partnered with Kia, so they've got the e-Niro and the Soul. And of course, there's going to be a lot more cars coming into this marketplace. If you look at normal 5-door hatchbacks for around about the £30,000 bracket, you've got Volkswagen's ID3. And don't forget, at considerably less money, there's the excellent MG ZS EV. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the Hyundai Kona Electric. We like its comfortable interior, its practical, its ease of use, its efficiency, and good value in lower trim levels. We don't like the toned down styling on the EV variant, some of the interior plastics, and its refinement. And here's what we like and what we don't like about the Vauxhall Mokka E. We like its styling. It handles well, its dashboard design, and its performance. We don't like its price compared with the Hyundai Kona, its lack of storage in the cabin, its brakes, and it can feel a bit claustrophobic inside, especially in the rear. So there we have it, two new small electric crossovers. Both will meet the needs of any small young family, and both hit their objectives, if you like, very, very well. But which one gets the nod? Well, let's remember what we said right at the start of the video. They have to be judged on the practicalities of a small family car. And therefore, with its bigger boot, slightly better interior space, more oddment space for children in the back, easier to see out of, and, let's not forget, cheaper price, then it has to be the Kona that gets a nod. Because remember, for the same price as this Mokka, you can have the Kona with a bigger battery, which gives you much bigger range, which means less time spent at charging stations with grumpy children in the back. But what I will say is this: if you still enjoy driving and you've yet to procreate and you want something that's still youthful, stylish and cool, then I'd buy the Mokka. And when was the last time you heard the words cool and Vauxhall in the same sentence together? Thank you for watching AutoEV. We'll see you again soon. Come on, Barry, let's go home. Yes, I know it's lunchtime. I know you're hungry. God, you get such a grumpy old bear when you're hungry. Do you know that? So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.